Hey guys, Vlad Moldavsky here from MeetAdvisors.com. I'm joined with Josh Felber, two-time best-selling author and serial entrepreneur from Cleveland, Ohio area. Josh, how are you today?
Awesome, Vlad. Appreciate you having me in.
Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
So, right off the bat, tell our audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, what are you involved in. We'd love to just open a dialogue like that.
For sure. Josh Felber, two-time best-selling author, serial entrepreneur. When I first started business, I was 14 years old. I've owned 15 different companies over the years and have been successful at some and some not so much. And so that's kind of what's got me started in the whole serial entrepreneur world. Was when I was 14, started a computer company, and it just kind of took off from there.
So you talked, you mentioned success and failure, right?
Right.
What has been the difference between the companies that have succeeded and the ones that have failed? Have you noticed anything particular? Can you talk to that at all?
Definitely. Some of it had to do with the partners I selected. So definitely have to make sure if you're going to have a partner selected, make sure they're the right one. It's just like you're getting married. Second thing is you got to really make sure the product that you have is delivering consistent value to you out there, to your customer, your clientele, and as well as driving, your passion behind it is very important. And so I think if you're missing either of those, you set yourself up for failure right away.
Mm-hmm. So down, this long road of entrepreneurship, there's been a lot of, ups and downs, but what has been maybe one or two principles that you've always lived by, where you're like, I'm starting a business, I know that this is the right, approach, this is how I want to do it. Is there anything that someone can take away from our audience, like, this is the one thing we always have to remember?
That's a great question. It's, I get it all the time, like, hey, what are the two things, or what can we do, to really make sure our business is successful? And I mean, one, I think people have to really understand and know why they're doing it. And I think that's the most important part. And some people are like, oh, I just want to make $1 million, or and it just ends up turning into a material thing. And you got to really dig in and down in your heart and understand that real deep why. What's going to get you up every morning? What's going to push you through the day and to go after it? And so I think once you have that and you really have that locked in and you have that understanding, then the second thing is getting on executing on it. There's so many people that have an awesome idea and they don't do anything about it, or if they start doing something about it, as soon as they hit that first challenge, they stop. And so kind of that execution, for me, as well as being relentless in what I do. So, you get that laser focused, and then you just get out there and you continuously keep going after it until you reach that.
So, something, hearing these things are really great. I'm young, and I'm kind of going through this entrepreneurial phase right now. And one of the things that we talked about, we were just having lunch 30 minutes ago. One of the things we talked about is, mentors, looking at guidance.
Sure.
Can you talk to us a little bit about, like, what has inspired you? Like, who's the one person, maybe there's two people, who's really drove, or not necessarily drove, but who's inspired you to be successful?
Definitely. I think everybody needs a mentor or some kind of coach, in what they do. Sports figures, they have coaches. They have mentors that pushes them, it helps them grow, they see things that other people don't see. And so for me, it started back when I was 14. I read Tony Robbins' Unlimited Power, and that book totally changed my life. And I've instilled those principles over the years, and for me, that's all I know. And it was actually a funny conversation. I was talking to my business coach one day, and I was just like frustrated. I was really frustrated with something, and he's like, Josh, you got to realize the majority of people out there have never been around the same thing you've been around your whole life. And I'm like, yeah. And so, for me, I had to take a step back and approach it from that direction. And so, Tony Robbins is an awesome example, of a mentor. And I think at some point, whether you have kids and they're little, you're younger, go out and find somebody that you could, that drives good values and beliefs that you can aspire and really connect with.
Phenomenal. Here's another question I have for you. One of the things we talked about was, getting out there, networking, meeting people. And one thing that stuck out is, how has getting out there you mentioned the last 18, 19 months, you've really made an effort to just meet as many people, build as many relationships. How has that, helped you, if it has? And then if it has helped you, how, what kind of message can you send to the Meet Advisors community? There's a lot of entrepreneurs who get out there
right.
and, they think they're doing the right thing, and they think that by sitting at a computer or typing or doing some manual work, they're going to grow their business, but they're really not. So maybe touch on that point a little.
Sorry.
We'll cut that out.
Yeah.
I think the most important part, is, like you said, is getting out there and getting in front of people. But I think where we are today, there's so much digital information. There's so many people doing the same thing that we're doing. Is we have to differentiate ourselves. We got to make ourselves different. And part of that is, how can we be an expert in our space? How can we make ourselves or, present ourselves in a way that somebody else isn't? And so, part of that is, the connections that you make, when you're out there. Part of it is, for myself, over the last 18 months, as you mentioned, is, I had to become, more known than I already was. I had to, get people to connect with me. And so, for that was getting out from in front of your computer to getting out in the marketplace and networking and meeting people and making those right connections. Because we can only do so much in a digital environment, but you still have to. There's still that human element, that personal connection that people have to drive us forward and to help us drive our businesses forward.
Great. So I was going to ask the profit versus the revenue question. So a business gets started, right? And always the question is, do you go for the revenues or do you go for the profit? Can you touch on that a little from your experience? At what points in time do you focus on growing your business and growing the profits? And at what point in time do you focus on revenue and, scaling things like that?
Sure. And that's a great question. I'm not a financial guy, but here's my thoughts and my ideas on this is, with revenue and with profit, you have to have both. And so with the revenue side of things and you see so many companies out there doing it right now, is they go out and they launch and they got millions and millions of dollars in sales, but they're losing money every month. And you can only do that so long. You can only get so many rounds of funding, and then then they're taking them public and they're pushing it out into the marketplace that way, and they're still losing money. And it's so for me, at least for my businesses, we've tried to grow and focus on growing a revenue standpoint, but also capture that profitability as well. And I think if you go into the market and you have yourself priced relatively to what you're doing and with those margins built in, then there should be no reason why you still shouldn't have the profit. Now, obviously, the profit may be a little less than where you should be, but as you grow and you increase those revenues, and then you increase that overall gap, shorten that overall gap, then your profits are going to overall increase.
Phenomenal. Thanks for answering that. So in terms of big wins or wins in your life, can you talk about like maybe one big win you had, and then just maybe tell us about the experience, like how was it, maybe selling your first company, like how did it feel, things like that.
Definitely. Up until a few years ago, I'd say my biggest win would be selling my company, but over the last few years after I had my kids, it was when my kids were born. So that was definitely the biggest win in my life. But from a business standpoint, it was when I was 25 and I was able to sell my company, and we put in 5.5 years of hard work, and you have somebody come in and say, hey, we'd love to acquire your portfolio of clientele. That was the best thing in the world, because one of the goals I set when I was 14, after reading Tony Robbins, was to hit that $1 million by the time I was 25, and that vehicle and that focus and that concentration all those years helped me reach that goal. So.
And what advice can you give to people who go through a situation where maybe they sold their company or they sold some sort of share of their business and they did make a lot of money? Being a young guy, I know from my perspective, if that happened to me overnight, my ego might be somewhere here, but and you might be the guy giving me advice, like, hey Vlad, like, let's get back. Well, really, what advice can you give to the young entrepreneur, to the old entrepreneur? You have that big win.
Sure.
What's next? And what kind of advice can you give?
And I'll tell you a story. So throughout my life, when I'm from 14 up to 25, my beliefs and my values were really associated with the material, the financial side of things. And so when that happened, I was like, awesome, and I invested a lot of it in the .com, and was leveraged in the market, but I was doing really well at that time until the big .com crash, and basically was wiped out of everything. And so I had so much of my emotions and values and beliefs tied to that piece of it. For me, it was a big struggle over that next 12 months to really figure out who am I, and to understand, if I was going to be able to ever do that again, and if I was worth it. And so, I think when you're moving forward into this, your values and beliefs need to be true to who you are, and look at money as just a vehicle to get you to your end goal. So whether it's time freedom, whether it's financial freedom, being able to spend more time with your family. For me, it's being able to do whatever I want, whenever I want, and and so that is what's important, in connecting that piece with my family overall. So
great. Now, you've given a lot of advice over the last 10 minutes or so, but if there's one thing that you would offer, let's say, a 50-year-old who's running a business and they just started up, and they're having issues, or maybe they're not having issues, but what's the biggest thing? And maybe it's the same thing that you just said. It's really put in the sweat, or truly believe in what you're doing. But is there anything else that you would say before ending this video recording or this conversation, that can bring value to us?
I think, and actually it was interesting, is a question I was picked for personal finance expert for 2014. And so the question was, well, what can you do to create more wealth or money or something for 2015? And, I thought about it, and there's all these top #1 people, right? Robert Kiyosaki and Susie Orman and Warren Buffett and all these people that I'm in this group against, I guess I'm competing with here, is how, they're going to all probably answer from a financial perspective, and I'm like, how can you really grow your business? Like, okay, let's not just put $100 aside every week, or this, and then invest it here. And for me, I think it's become what's called omnipresence, is being well known everywhere all the time, whether it's myself or my business and that sort of thing. So the more people know who you are or know who your business is, the more people that are going to be attracted to your website or what you're doing. And and then from that point, it's then creating as much value and giving as much value back to people as that you can. And I think that combination will drive more wealth and more revenue to you over the long run.
Phenomenal. Josh, what's your website?
JoshFelber.com, F-E-L-B as in boy, E-R.com. And you can also follow me on Twitter at FelberJosh.com, or FelberJosh.
Guys, Josh is going to be joining us in a couple of months as a host from Cleveland. And Josh, really, again, thanks for flying out here to Chicago. We really appreciate your advice, and we really look forward to growing this relationship together.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on the air.
Take it easy, guys.